So, dear colleagues, as I promised to you at the very beginning, we have to leave this space with a very sound understanding of the steps to be undertaken. So, when we are back home, as experienced colleagues shared, in a year you would have a strategy. Alexander will explain for how long that may be required. We're all looking at European Union. There are some standards and requirements in terms of the strategy duration. So let's proceed to the exactly the part of theoretical/practical engagement. Please be active, and I'll give the floor to Alexander Salantai. Alexander, you are been mentioned several times, so please prepare your questions and please be active. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all. It's pleasure to meet those whom I don't know yet, and in fact, that discussion is going to be devoted to all the issues and challenges related to the strategy. I would really like to proceed to Q&A format immediately. I was here with you, but I would really like that Q&A format to be focused, because to an extent I had a feeling that there was an opportunity to press on him on some painful issues, but there is the subject, the community development strategy. So I will start and then you will engage yourself. All I would encourage us to have a dialogue. So the first case brought in here, that strategy transforms into the development tool. Are there anyone from communities who believe that strategy is the tool for the development? There are few. Am I correct in understanding that those who do not raise their hands believe that the strategy is not working document, operational document? So why you keep your hands low? Tired to raise hands. Okay, then the question number 2. That's the tool for public investments. Is there anyone who has doubts or any concerns that strategy is the tool for public investments? Ideas, thoughts, comments, remarks? No video in here. It's a live discussion. We do not plan to demonstrate anything, any records in communities. I see it in such a way that in last year, when the public investment reform been launched, few communities, those who were utilizing strategies, started growth. So the reform stimulated communities to complete their strategic planning, some to adjust their strategic planning, some to get their strategies. From the formal and bureaucratic standpoint, there is a requirement to have such a document and it's been actioned. But the essence of this document has not been changed. So, let me say, we have cases when individual has documents that he or she is a specialist, but in reality she is too far away from being professional. We have cases, and maybe it's going to be a bit more painful, we have cases when, according to Core 2 and all this decrees and according to terms of references, community is a community. But in terms of real essence of community, it's still never-ending, never-meeting story. I'll soft a little. Do we have villages or towns who until 2019-2020, until the reform been included into the community, then being endorsed, but people still live separately, isolatedly, and they don't believe themselves as a community and they still live with the past and they don't feel themselves as a community. Do we have that? So overall, the Euro community is there, but de facto, dozens of percentage of population of a community do not feel their community belonging. Well, what can we say but for the document for development strategy? And there were a number of documents before the reform named as the development strategy, but has nothing to do with the strategy. It's been named as a strategy, but it does not make it a strategy. So, when we have 3 letters written on the fence, it doesn't mean that it is there. It's just written, and the fence is still there.
So the document that we took the program of social economy, we got something from Oblast strategy. We edited it a little bit in different format, and now we call it not social economy but the strategy of community. But it didn't become a strategy because of that. Strategy doesn't answer the question where this community is going to. It's right here now. So often they are describing like here we are, a bit like a passport, what a community is. So that's but often there's no data, no history, no consistent. Just yesterday we had a joke in the team which they wrote about big solar valley of love founded by German repatriants. It's a text from strategy which has been publicly discussed. But okay, at least there is historic data what's on the territory. Next, there has to be goals, targets. That's even worse because between the goals and the vision what has to be, there has to be a vision what has to become, but often there's goals immediately. Okay, so goals without the vision. But at least that's what you want to achieve. When you start reading those goals and start understanding that we are against everything bad in favor of everything good. If so, then the strategy is unclear. You don't know what is your strategy. Like you're here, but where do you want to arrive? Because sometimes they write at the same time. We want here and we want also here, and we want to be in 3 different places because they're cool places. So everywhere a little bit. Where specifically, we don't know. But if you read thoroughly, like we want to be here and also over there, like Twister game. And nowhere specifically. So that's the problem, not just with data, but with leadership even. The leadership meaning that the sufficient number of people in the community, from the head of the local self-governance to those who don't work in local self-governance, from private businesses, together take responsibility of where they want to bring their territory to. And it is clearly seen that there's missing experience of proper approach to this document, like a document which describes an ideology, the foundational document, which shows where the community wants to go. They write it as a formal document, but if it's a formal document, then there's no talk. But if you want to see what is the document about, let's look at this, because in the strategy there had to be a vision on what the community should be, what are the goals that are measurable, whether it's achievable or not forever, not for 50 years or 100 years, but it's like European cycle, a 7-year planning. It's up to 7 years. Some specific goals, what community wants to achieve, and how it will be different from now until 7 years later. What's the essence of this transformation? It has to be priorities, what we focus our resources, because you cannot achieve everything good on one same territory. You're going to be strong in some things, and it's even in the capital where we are. There are strengths, but there are weak points. Everyone has them. So it has to be specific, how specifically you want to achieve those goals. And then public investments, a portfolio of projects. So there are also private investments, and for many communities they're bigger than public. And you can't do everything through public investments. It's unrealistic. So it's like cities built in a unnatural way. It's a phrase from the book. Changes of the century. What are the biggest changes of the latest millennia? That people went to go to live in cities, but any city that's built in a natural way cannot be at the same time without these people. And it's private sphere. Private to small to residents. So the strategy has to respond to that. And what do we see? We see the problem for investment, so that the community starts moderating their project of public investments, and they have to be bound in a strategy. So that this strategy is in the action plan, it's technical, and each community does it successfully, no problems there. Because each community, if they design a project, they can always come back to the strategy plan, action plan, and even the specific task to correct something, to introduce something. But I've been asked a lot, are there any limitations? How periodic, how frequent, once a year, that the strategy has to they can edit the strategy as much as they want, but they need to have the tasks and goals. But here are many problems begin for each community that in Ukraine. It's really a problem for all strategies in Ukraine, because it turns out that even if we work on real strategy, if we want to have some separate goals, but and you will be squeezed between decision making, MPs, the public. Even if you take leadership and responsibility, that you want to bring the people over there and everybody agrees, but when you distribute the funds and prioritize the funds, each spender of the funds, each fraction political party, and even in the smaller communities, they start stretching these resources, and that's where the problems with priorities begin. And it cannot be dealt with through bureaucracy, like remove everyone, because then you will lose rating or partners or trust. So how to deal with this problem and to understand whether this problem was dealt with or not. I do it in a separate way. I say you cannot stop the head of the community because of the wish to be liked by all the structures. So you take all the good stuff, you take it to the strategy. I understand that. But most importantly is that you don't lose the essence in the project. Because if community has some vision and has a strategic understanding, you have to express it as a strategic goal, or at least a set of goals. like sub goals within big goals, and it has to be readable. Readable in terms of when we read the strategy, we see is there something unique or not. And again, I cannot stop you, and the culture of our citizens will not change, where each spender, each congregation will demand for their street, for their district, to have strategy, something special and big, and demand these things from you that just stretch your financial resource. Every kindergarten, every school, every company, utilities, and spender, and even the small community of employees, they will require and demanding support, and you cannot refuse them from their real problems, and to not to write their problems in a strategic document. You have to be really experienced in implementing strategy. I haven't met any such communities, and I think it will be the next stage of evolution in Ukraine of strategizing, when we clearly seeing what we focus on, not the document that tries to pander to everyone. When we try to pander to everyone in one document so that everybody sees them in the strategy, we lost the essence of these documents, and that's the problem. Because sometimes you read a strategy, and I recommend this example for you for self-assessment. You take the strategy, and we did it with Larissa, with Christina, Irina, and Vlad, with different communities, and it works. And I recommend this. You take the strategy that it looks like you are doing, and cross out the name of your community, and put the name of any other community which you know that exists, and start reading your strategy, not from with your name. If it matches, then it's a problem. Like there's a matching attire. They look similar. But if everything matches, then one strategic goal works. So let's take something else. But you can't have everything matching 100%. So something has to be mismatching. And the same with the strategy. In order to understand completely that we are too excited in satisfying everyone, because the problems are ever the same. So people are different in what they want. But when we talk about real understanding of tomorrow, somewhere in strategic operational goals, they have to be mentioned. And it doesn't match. It's not compatible. What is incompatible for you is compatible for others. For you, it's an element of vision or one strategic goal, or it's a set of sub-goals. For you, it's very important. But it doesn't it's not good for other community. And it's a test how to understand. Are we talking about declarations or slogans? And it's a good election campaign, because nobody will measure if it's a real strategy or some good declarations. So let's analyze. Other than what I said, the strategy can not work. Why? Sometimes the goals are very specific, and sometimes you can agree that it's unique for the targets of this community, but if we have COVID and large-scale invasion and everything gets longer, electricity or military income tax, and then you set an ambitious goal to achieve the vision of the community, to understand some realistic, unique goals, but it's a huge number. That means a little resource there, a little resource there. It's all realistic, but it's too much. That's why everything is a priority, then it doesn't work. Another reason that we see in the strategy many times, it's that like there is no connection to real resources. And I raise it again. Public investment, it's a big thing preparing Ukraine. We need to be strategizing everything for EU public investments. If no strategy, there will be no money, and that means there is strategy or a vision. But the resource of public investment is much smaller resource in the hands of structures and organizations working in Ukraine, rather than all humanitarian organizations. Humanitarian response is bigger than public investment. Private capital are bigger than public investments. For all the local small communities, are there small communities here? Even for Chutkivska community, which will never be small, it's the second in size. But even if in your community, the number of money that people from your town have is bigger than the number of money, that the amount of money that the remaining people have. So you take the general budget, all the private funds of all the owners and residents in the town. You take a part of oblast budget and part of the public. So you connect all of this and compare to the amount that private residents in private capital have. So the second amount will be bigger, much bigger. It will be much bigger. So what are we basing our strategy on? We want to achieve those goals, and we didn't connect between the goals and real capital that knows about this territory. If there are grandparents that go to Canada, Cherkiv is their small residence that to come over for a couple of days, and then they go away, celebrating weddings and funerals. But they know this territory. The territory is not something alien for them, even for a town like Cherkiv. What about the smaller communities when the number of population 2, 3,000, 15,000, and all the young people didn't return. They are in other countries, so they have the capital. Those who in the 90s, they were graduates in universities, but they were living in dormitories with pickled fruit. Now they have connections and information. And we don't look at these resources, just an example of those resources. So the connection in public investments, that the public investments should be accelerator, not the main resource that we want to bet on strategy. Why strategies don't work, although everything is good? Strategy is there, portfolio public investments is there, and it's the good projects and dream, but you cannot equalize these things. They're based on strategy. What else is based on strategy? Everything is based on strategy. The third problem, and I think our work in this room and other communications will help with this. The strategies were done later than some projects. We have PCDs accumulated, the two versions of Dream, the set of different problems, and some projects are autonomously living without the strategy. So I think this approach, the project planning, will be liquidating that. So we see projects that have nothing to do with strategy. So they are not reflected in project portfolio proposals. They are not connected. Next, the strategy is written for ticking the boxes. I'm not commenting that. If it's just formally with no idea to implement and no monitoring and no executives. I often see, like, we wrote a great strategy with our community and there was a great strategy, no questions. But when the strategy is done, here there was a work group of people and here there's nobody. Here there are no events on strategy. Here we have data and the results, and here we don't collect data. So sometimes we don't see it as a task. It's a global problem. Even in the recommendations or implementation strategy, there's no consistent data, only monitoring. So Taras Barensky is here. So Vitaly has said that he will fix that. So it's from the state, impetus, and nature. So we made a strategy, we presented it, we discussed, and that's it. We created political impulse. Now we have the vision. But implementing is much more difficult. And then we'll use for investments. And most strategies are not working. Among these reasons, an interesting conclusion by Christina most strategies are not working not because they're bad. So aside from my critique of the text, understanding that some strategies are weak, but what if the community writes for the first time? It's natural that they're weak. Borscht, sometimes someone cooks for the first time, sometimes it takes several attempts. So strategy is a document that you have to learn. So that's why editing, corrections. But if you really made it to implement, and then you will implement it, then it works. But if we did the strategy not as a tool, we don't see it. So only it works or partially or doesn't work at all. So what's the difference between good strategy or bad strategy? It's not yet everything, but it's number one. So first of all, there's a lot of text here, but I understand that as one writer wrote and said, I don't have enough time, so I'm going to write a lot. I don't have time to find concentrated thought what I want to say and clearly express it. That's the strategy. Sometimes there's this no clarity and you're not focused, so you're writing everything like a thesis. Whereas a good strategy is clearly focused. You open a strategy and you have an understanding, where's the vision, what's the presentation, like the greeting of community leader, and then you understand these are the key messages. what the community is aimed at. So, general strategy of Ukrainian community, economic recovery, economic development of the territory. Second goal, working with human capital and providing social humanitarian growth. Third, growth, services and high quality local self governance. Fourth is well developed civil society, involvement of people in decision making. And fourth, international cooperation, communities between themselves, support in terms of cohesion and interaction of Ukrainian communities with other communities in Euro integration. So basically 5 goals, universal approach. But it's not a strategy. It's one size fits all. It means it fits nobody. It doesn't solve. It doesn't make a difference. No, an actual strategy is where you have clearly formulated priorities as targets and goals. So, in big cities, there's so much of everything, they cannot formulate smaller goals. Or smaller community with so many problems that these priorities would fit. But if let's dig further in operational goals, in sub-goals. But if improvement of quality and its civil society and Euro integration, you understand that this is all this activities, self-governance, healthcare, medicine, economy, and it's not it's nothing but literature. So there's no balance, there's no selection of what's the priority. So this one wants to become a medic. This one wants to be an officer. So, and this one wants to do robotics. So he'll be an engineer. So we're going to sports. And there are special talented. They will have 2 professions or 3. But there's a super talented student, and they submit for everything, and they pass. But you can't learn everything. You cannot. 3 or 4 at least, but not 5. It just doesn't work. So this and engineering, military and engineering. And so you choose to be an Olympic instructor. So you're making a choice. You have to make a choice. And when you read a strategy, you don't see a choice. Everything, all the problems are there, all the numbers are there, everything's there. There were 40 earmarked programs, and they wrote all of them. I know we are smiling because in our recovery plan it's the same. Everything's there. But it wasn't a document of a strategy. It was a fundraising document. But if we talk about real strategy community, there has to be a certain logic that decisions are made because this and that. Then they have to be portfolio projects oriented for different sources of funding. And sometimes there are no indicators, which is a typical problem. Even if we formulate it very globally, like economic development of our territory, a key strategic goal. Okay, so we formulated it roughly. Like we need to increase the jobs and demographics, to have more immigrants. So anyway, global. But we can rescue the goal even if it's formulated too widely. So we can still rescue it through a specific concrete goal and as an indicator, as a something that gives you some grounds. So like economy, but we don't see how many companies you have, how many jobs you create, not how you what's the payroll, not how many people depart or come over here. So you didn't reflect these indicators. So that means it's not working.
A specific normal strategy is that's ability to include a measurable monitoring, tracking, and measurable parameters. Well, it's difficult to anticipate whether we would be able to change the situation, but the basic understanding that we have to work on increasing the number of a small and medium business, or increase the number of people to take jobs here, or to reduce the number of outflow personnel. There should be some figures what stays behind understanding of that problem, some basic parameters to be included into a strategy, and to do some hypothesis what numbers are to be changed and what are the projects needed. And there is no interaction between sectors. I already mentioned that I spoke something about diaspora and the representatives of community. You see, for some communities, these are the rocket science, because strategies nothing includes except the budgetary sphere, not even the entire budgetary sphere, but also the budgetary sphere, which subordinated to a local authority. You know what that leads to? I'll give you an example. So we're here at Kiev city. I hope we're not broadcasting that in the media. It's just a pure share of experience, and Kiev City Council would be unhappy. But you know what Kiev put on students? Nothing. You see, Kiev alive to an extent because of the students. There are no communities where at least someone who sent their child to Kiev and does everything possible for that child to get a firm standing here. You see where our competences from the Kiev City Council. Sometimes strategies are so narrow in some sectors and areas. Not saying there is a cooperation between budget and private, budget and international organizations, budget and humanitarian, charity, NGOs. There are no other budgetary spheres because it is not our competence. So what do we do then? Strategy for community, or authority plan, which we call a strategy? What is this document is about? This is a territorial community strategy, and despite the ownership form and responsibility, we are looking for ways and means to influence on that. We negotiate, we include representatives to the working groups, we do hearings, debates, discussions, we engage them to execution, we draft mutually beneficial projects, we look for common points, we pay efforts to bring those who make this territory to be a territory. Where is the community with uranium mine? That's you. The only thing, just to refer, my condolences and my support in such a budgetary situation, but strategically, the vision of the community development, that's to get rid of dependability on the mine, that's strategically. But speaking not about a strategy, but a typical document, it would say there would be no attention paid, because where we are and where the uranium mine, it's not our ownership. And in the entire strategy comes to be the uranium mine. And in fact, all the communities survived that in a given moment. At given moment, there was a fishery community dependent on fishery, hunting community dependent on those who are the forest, the forestry community dependent on the forest recreation area. But a single area of economy says that's a dormitory, not a community. Dormitory. Dormitory owned by something else, and in other words, the huge economic challenge if that economic area goes far beyond some percentage. Because of the problems, and the definitely problems would happen, and they happen in every economy. If you are in a pure forestry trained business and here comes COVID, and you have empty facilities, every area, every functionality has challenges, and community strategy is about diversification. That's the strategy, but it is not the action plan how we build the admin facility or social support facilities. That's the strategy. So a real strategy, that's cooperation and partnership. Cooperation and partnership, that's the focus on priorities and logics and solutions of intersectoral interaction. And it comes clear why the public investment is only the portion of that. And while the portion is very limited, it's very difficult to get access to it. But it is anticipated for every community. It is important to include that portion in such a way that would accelerate the others. So it would be extremely creative for the community and would be critical for the community development. So we get to investment project and we approach that in such a way. So strategy clearly shapes the problems of the community, is reflected in a strategy. We know the social needs and expectations where the problem is. We have objectives as a specific parameters what we aspire to achieve, and based on that we can draft specific projects, plans, portfolios, and look for resources for implementation. So we take objectives from here, missions and tasks here, ideas for the project solutions, and draft specific projects here. If we move the opposite direction, then we work in the opposite direction. 2-3 years we still exist with these projects. So a certain pool of ideas, project proposals, without understanding that definitely this is fundamental for the community. So you feel, you comprehend, you are a leading personnel, you're well aware about the real needs of your territories, but it's been processed at this level, but it has not been developed at strategic level. That's what Anna mentioned at the beginning. The community has to build a school. Obviously, clear if you ask guys from education that the school is needed, but is it really key project for this community, for the community development? There is no analysis, there is no focus, understanding the set of priorities. So this work has not been done, and the views could be radically different, starting from a businessman who has adult kids and it's not a problem for him anymore, and he would say the school is not a priority, and up to education representative says yes, this is their priority and we can sacrifice others. And there is no collated document analyzing the needs. So if this project emerges, then you have to filter it, or following the logic of strategic planning of the entire community, we have to be based not on the exact projects, but we start with the existing problems and challenges of community, including the factors of security, needs, private and public sector. And if we process that diligently, then we cover not only the private sector of our own, but we reach diaspora, we reach potential investors, and if we process budgetary area, we engage the oblast, national, and international European institutions. So we multi-sectorally can deal with the problems. Then we identify what has to be changed, and then the tree of objectives emerges. The other thing to be mentioned, strategy sounds equally for all the communities, but is seen and understood differently, because communities are different and this diversity influences a lot. As I said, clothing, and everyone would have different. Someone would have casual, some business, some sports. If you say shoes, someone has sneakers, someone high heels, and the same to the strategies. So that different communities, different strategies, and very different approaches to make a strategy real. We can approach from different standpoints. Obviously, if it is a deoccupied community, the focus comes to all the aspects of restoration related to infrastructure and return of people. This example in 2023, first town in Ukraine which was deoccupied by the armed forces a year after the occupation had 96% of return of local inhabitants, despite the fact it's 35 kilometers away from Russian border. That's the parameter. And it's not about constructions, housings, square meters of concrete. It's about people. And there were significant damages. But in terms of housing, there were ways to return. But if community has destroyed, where Oksana is, Kharkiv Oblast, she left. So in their community, they have no power supply, water supply, no bridges. That would be part of a package. People plus infrastructure. I remember Natalia Hansen, when you had occupation, deoccupation, what was destroyed? And he said Russians looted shops twice, once on the way to Kiev, second time on return. It's not about infrastructure and return of people. It's about shock, deoccupation shock, and how do we live in this new environment. But the approach should be based on something. If it is deoccupation, it's damage, restoration, infrastructure conditions. The other, agricultural community. There are small agricultural communities. Yes, we said hello, glad to see one more time. Obviously, the focus on local industry and manufacturing, because there's most dangers that the big companies, the big farmers would digest the human capital and approach to the development of this community. And what was critical yesterday is not critical today, and we have to find the answer to what people are going to do here and everything about added value. And that's obviously a different focus on what we start with, although there could be some subjects in common. The town community focus on private investments, and it's seen whether it's a 30,000 populace or 500,000 inhabitants, but working with a private investor, engaged in all the processes. Even a smaller community, less known, but has been developed, and larger community can have no housing construction. Can you imagine community, 100,000 inhabitants, a huge pressure on housing market, housing destruction. There are no housing or building companies, obviously, because that happens to a private capital, that happens to a private investments. That's what happens with the private sector. Could be dozens of different reasons, but if it is about local leaders, you hardly can do anything. But if it is about planning and communicating community, then the strategy could be helpful. If you look at the Zhovkva community, if there is a lack of advertisement, lack of promotion, and I'm promoting Zhovkva community right now, advertising it, what we did several times. They've included that in their strategy. We want to be known, we want to be heard, because we have to increase the number of investors who are part of crafts, business, small business, tourism. Everyone likes to be known. But why you should be known among private investors? Because you grow cucumbers, or you want to put IT downshifters, because you want to build houses, or you want to develop small crafts. A small business is not endless. You cannot knock every door in a business. Now we have 20 huge businesses in different sectors, and you have a single project manager, one community lead. Which exhibition you are going to attend? Every 20? None? Or maybe one every quarter, but the one which you believe is critical for yourself. For a big city, that's probably housing investments. For a small community, that's a selection of a product or a service, and that's also selecting the objectives. High-risky communities, that's about uranium community, and others, they have a heating factories, coal mines, dependability on the sanctuary facilities, those who operates at a semi-dormitory or full-scale dormitory, depending on a single industry or single facility, with enormous risk of hitting this object, changing the paradigm of this object, security risks. That's some ecological risks, Kakhovska, water storage and destruction of the dump, and that's community that depends on something single that sits in the risky area of the man-caused disasters or natural disasters. So strategy should be aimed at reducing the community dependability or reducing the risks for community. These are just examples and could be many of those. And while a single community comprises different villages and towns, there would be different options and balances. Such and such, it could be such and such. Could be all four in together in different settlements. And thank you, Christina, for having such a beautiful brief. But these are just examples what we can bring into the profound discussion in selecting things for strategic planning. Just few more minutes left. I just would like to make strategies operational and some things to do, to see real needs, to hear real business, to identify your strengths, to bring it into priorities. And as soon as we set the priorities and things that we can influence, that we cannot influence, or we partially can influence, where we willing to learn to influence. Just another example, quite often community says, we see that that would be critical, but we have nothing to do to that. But maybe the community could learn that to do. Or they say it's not our competence, but it affects us. And then community has to learn and find partnerships and ways. And it's maybe not immediate competence for a community, but this is the essence of the strategy development. So where we develop where we are not, we become someone who are not today, and we aspire some status which we don't have now, and we gain something that we don't have today. But we developed, we moved, and we got to that point, and we became different. So that's the idea of strategic approach to the planning. So that concludes my brief, and I'm open for Q&A. I spent too much time talking a lot to initiate a live discussion. Volodymyr, you have a mic in a second. Thank you, Alexander. From the practical standpoint of referring to your science and skills that you're trying to bring in 20 years, I'm not that old, but the way that our strategy should be organized. How should we behave? What should we do if on the 7-year route comes temptations in a way of big money to implement those projects which were not identified as the key in a strategy. Let's say in a strategy we identified clean water to Chertkiv, 100% of water supply to community, but in 2-3 years, due to the situation, we got 3 million euro, 2 million euro grant to rebuild education or healthcare. And while our strategy says we aspire clean water and we focus our efforts there, but different grants come and community and team comes, look, let's take this money. It's been mentioned partially about wishes, everything and no, but nevertheless 2 million euros are here, but it is not your priority. So what the decision to be made, and how do we explain to community changes in our vectors? Well, we are not on a TV. Again, it's not been broadcasted. To be honest, subjective factors cannot be excluded. If the community lead is ambitious individual, so ambitious that could see the growth opportunities or would like to demonstrate the outcomes for the region, for oblast, or for the state, they can complete that included so many projects and there are so many options that there are no budgets for own contributions are insufficient and started their own fundraising. On the other hand, he starts his journey along the offices, Christmas, late evenings, being in Portugal or being in Norway. I'm not going to ask when that had happened, but if you're ready, if you raised your bar so high and to work hard, and that is also due to the cost of your life, of your health, that's your contribution. You are ex-military who is not on the military, but you say this is your front line. That's okay, but it is not okay for each and everyone, because a community lead is a human being saying, I want to have some normal amount of work, I have to have some normal responsibilities, and you still get back to strategy and priorities. You still would say, look, I will do the water and then I can leave. Whether you had any mayor who said, I will do the water and I'll go Bunyak between Sadowy and Lviv, and he said, I've done the oil pipe and I'll do a water pipe and I'll put some water to Zhovkva. So individual takes a certain amount of responsibility and clearly sets that as a strategy focus. That's a subjective factor. If you're ready constantly to increase the number of these projects and put them in a strategy and reflect them in a strategy and expand that resource, so then try to calculate where you get that resource from. I don't know. Anyone knows more MPs than he. I don't know so many MPs. So talk to them, convince them, spend time, spend weekends, look pictures and photos how their kids are growing without him. Maybe that's the level of ambition. Is that normal? Is it normal working mode? No. That's a super leadership, personal super leadership. But how the strategy should work? The strategy should work in such a way that still you define priorities for Chertkiv, because the town to be developed as an industrial town of Ternopil Oblast, and to make it public, we have to sort out the case of water and polluted water, and industry is not willing to join the area without clear water, and a small business is not developed. What they could lead, maybe the second, third, fourth time, you are not going to be the endless mayor, you're not going to be elected, but you would be clear that we achieved 5-7 years and everyone would thank you. Ambitious would reduce and all those discussions will calm down. You see that moment, it's the mixture of subjective factor. If a community lead tends to cover everything, get all the projects, and may end up that the budget would be insufficient, but you raise the bar and you look in more investments to attract even more to cover that part of financing, but you demonstrate results. But that's result not only for you, not for the mayor, council, not for the citizen. Your rating within the community is growing, your popularity is growing, you are known at the oblast level, state level. If all the community leads would do so, Ukraine would have 1,469 candidates for presidents. But we need a working strategist, working in a normal mode. And you should not be a hero every day, but in a normal, planned way, met key objectives during your period of being a city mayor, council, by implementing specific key projects. I was in your shoes. I was in a local governance. I've implemented a project to switch off a little town from the centralized heating. That's the most resilient town right now. And 3 mayors being changed, electives changed. I was in power, in opposition, and project from my idea became not mine, mine again, and I cut the cross stripe. You know how much I've got because of prioritization. Not having that priority and focus on all the budgets and votes, and I would not receive that much negativism, but I would not get that level of result, the end state result. You see, the implementation of a strategy, why is it more difficult? Because when we put a decent strategy and we stepped beyond the portfolio, we start pressing key points, accelerating implementation, and here comes the problem with the strategy implementation. We would like to avoid that. A public investment only help here, and public investments would be the second time helpful. First time to produce the strategy, and secondly to demonstrate that we have a portfolio for investment. We submitted that to DREAM, we submitted that elsewhere what's been supported we do. What has not been funded, we're looking for alternative supports, but it goes beyond our authorities. We have no money for everything. We have strategy, we have portfolio, we can go for elections, maybe not with the bigger rating than with the previous elections, but not less than the previous one. I have prepared a portfolio, visited key international activities, mentioned about problems everywhere, and public investments as it is. So in this case, public investments plays non-typical function as they've been originally initiated. Additional bonuses, additional benefits, besides what they've been originated for. But for your own budget, you hardly can do things without setting priorities. But you can do your priority setting. Apologies for taking too much personal examples, but I hope that would be interesting. Maybe someone who have not met you can meet you closer. I apologize. More questions, not only the single community under. So is it clear what to do with the strategy? I presented that information how to start from scratch, or how to edit what you have, or to complete and do it something better in terms of novelties. Any questions, any discussion points? Irina, your lead. I think people are a bit shy or tired. So our plan is as follows. To be honest, no. Let's proceed in such a way. I will bring Larisa Leshchenko in here. Alexander told you what he told, and Larisa will present to you these measurements. Your strategy goes down to the investment directions. There are some limits and some parameters that you aspire to achieve. A bad example that I always raise, we improve our schooling education and reform of new Ukrainian school, NUSH. We implement that for several years in communities. We received subventions, and we still say that the equipped rooms is 0 for us. But we would like to have 1. We have 13 schools in community. We already equipped 50 rooms, but we say 0 equipped, and we take money for 1 classroom. We have 50 as the basic ones, an overall amount 250 in all these 13 schools. So our target parameter should be 250 as this new schooling program. So majority has 0, 1, but not 50 or 250. So in a strategy, speaking about investments, there are also some measurable things that will not just make the world better place, but as the community leads mentioned, that we develop our communities in a very specific way. And I would like to give the floor to Larisa Leshchenko, and he is going to take you through that Alexander is here and you think about your questions, because we have to go home after Larissa. Few more words to conclude with some homework. While we're all here, please ask your questions in terms what to do. Larissa, thank you. I understand that you are a bit tired and exhausted, but I'll try to be brief and precise in things that we're going to talk.
So first I present myself. As Zorina said, I'm Larissa Leshenko, and I work now as an advisor for the ICANN team in the Institute of Kiev School of Economy. Before, for 30 years, I worked in World Bank, and I worked from I worked to work with World Bank in Azerbaijan, Liberia, and for 9 years I worked in different countries, and I wrote more than 10 different strategies between the World Bank and different countries of the world. So that's the experience. And I'm among those communities. I'm from Kiev. I lived in Kiev and I come back to Gramada. This community, my son is for 2 years in the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Today there was Oksana from Savency. And in Savency she's also serving, and happy to see everyone. I want to share knowledge and experience in writing strategies. So when I started working on strategy, and the partnership of Ukraine and World Bank was back in 2000. Back then, the World Bank only started preparing strategies that are based on results. Before, the strategies were written just doing project like that or like that in a country like that or that. From 2000, the World Bank started working with measurable results, and it was difficult. It was difficult for the bank itself, and the partners and the governments, because nobody understood. We came to the government and said, look, we need results. We had debts on salary. We had to cut it by 30%, the debt on pensions. And they said, no, we know how the banks work. You have to accept the cabinet of ministers. This is the amendments to the law. And I said, no, the way you do it, it's a different question altogether, but we need results. And I want to tell you that when I started doing this, there was one interesting thing to note. I had a great teacher who used to help me writing strategies several times in the bank, and he always said, writing a strategy, is it a science or an art? What do you think? Is it a science or art? Science or art? As a planning tool, it's an art. And you say artful science. Okay, I like that. What do you think, Volodymyr? You've motivated so much when you talked. Thank you for that. So what's your opinion? Is it a science or... It's an art how to use science. All right, thank you. So look, I used to work in the Academy of Science. I'm a mathematician. It's my basic education. For me, it was science. And he said, no, science is when you collect data, when you analyze data, when you look at the trends, and you compare something. That's where science is. So as a foundation of strategy, there is science, there is scientific analysis of what we have collected, analyzed, but we have to also work with the community itself, as Alexander said, because implementing a strategy is not just about public investments. The whole community will get together around those pillars that we will build our strategy on. Each has to feel that theirs is their ownership. They are the owners of the strategy. They have to make a contribution for the strategy to work. And from that point of view, it's already art, because you, as locals of governance, as mayors of cities, you arrive to this community, you talk to this community, and you try to find the magnet that the heads of communities were talking about, that have to unite the entire community for strategic goals. So the first principle is like scientific art or artful science. The second thing that Luis Alvaro taught me, he said, look, if you can, on one page, to write a strategy, it's a great strategy. But if you can't put it on one page, you have 155 pages, that's a bad strategy. That's what Alexander said. Because if a strategy is about everything good against everything bad, that's not a strategy. You should write 3 topics. And I like the number 3. More than a 3, it doesn't work. So 3 by 3 by 3, and then it's a tree of strategic priorities. So if you have the goal for your community, like for instance, we have a solar community, and we show for 3 months more than 1,000 representatives from communities, and we have a solar community. There are 50,000 population, and there are 4,200 IDPs. So a strategic goal that this community has is to have as many IDPs integrated in their community. And it's not that we want to return all of the Ukrainian territory. They want them all to come back to their cities and villages, but it's a lengthy period of time. When I worked in Azerbaijan, you know that there were territories in Karabakh and 7 districts around Karabakh. And imagine 9 million population and 1 million IDPs. Every 10th in Azerbaijan was an internally displaced person. And 35 years basically they lived outside of their places of origin, where their roots are. But their goal was to return there. Of course, now that their territories have returned to Azerbaijan, a lot of them are not returned. So a lot of them have died, and many young people who relocated, they stayed there. And now there's a program, and I'm reading about this. They wanted to do something for those regions, but it's important. And we all want our people to return to our cities and villages that the war removed them from, but also for these people where people want to feel okay. Some will stay in Zhovkova or Shmerenka or elsewhere. So that means if this community, and we say they set their goal to have as many people retained, remaining in community, what do we have to do for that? And if we set this goal, and it's a unified goal, because there are experts, there are experienced people, they are skilled workers, we want them to stay. So then everything else will be subordinated to this general goal. For instance, we do some surveys for them, like citizens from this city or from other cities. So problem of schools, they're overloaded. There are many children, and not too many classes. There are 2 shifts, there's no shelter. So then we understand that in order for achievement of our goal, we have to at least do something with their school education. Second thing, They say, you know, you have water of bad quality. They only have water 5 hours a day, and we want to have a normal water supply 24/7. So you subordinate these goals to the general goal. So second, if you want to write your strategy on one page, and it will clearly state what is your target thing, then it's your great strategy. And thirdly, he says, you're a mathematician, right? So 1 plus 1, what is it? 2. And he says, well, in development, 1 plus 1 is not 2, it has to be more than 2. So it's not, it's more than the sum of its elements. So if you invest into something, you not only build a hospital, but you're also repairing the road. And you know, when I worked in Liberia and we had a situation, there was this one region where there were no roads at all, and there were huge maternal mortality, and so the donor said we build a maternity house, we teach the nurses, doctors, and then the World Bank had to build the road. Just imagine a country where there are only 12%, 10 to 12% roads have proper coverage, tarmac. The rest are just dirt roads, and the seasons of rain, it's just swamp. So if there's no road, they bring these mothers for 6 hours, and they cannot bring them to proper delivery. And the bank was ready to finance the road, but the government started thinking, no, you know, the Chinese are offering a great loan to us. It's a great loan because it takes so long with the World Bank, we won't need a road by then. And so they started working with Chinese. It didn't work out, so imagine there is a hospital, there is a maternity house, and everybody trained, there's equipment, nurses, doctors, everything. But the fatality rate is still the same, still high. So that's what I'm talking about. When 1 plus 1 has to be more than 2. So when you're planning your project portfolio, there has to be 1 plus 1 plus 1, and it's more than the sum total of the elements. They have to work in synergy. If you want to create new jobs, industrial parks, then you have to think, what else should be an added value to make it work? So these are simple things. I don't want to dwell too long on this, but basically what's written here is what Alexander said. The one thing that I want to focus your attention on is results for community, and we will now work on this specifically. So strategic priorities, they are shaping these columns of investment projects. They are the pillars that everything is going to be based on. So you selected for yourself that you want jobs, services, infrastructure, energy efficiency, but all of that has to serve, as I said, some general goal, and the sum total of all that, everything you will achieve as a result, will be more than the sum total, and adding them, you have to achieve a higher indicator. Now, as I said, we're creating conditions for integration of IDP through creating new jobs, revenues. We told them, they told us that. So we will stay if there's jobs, if there's access to services, education, water, infrastructure, energy efficiency. Then our strategy is not just construction of something. It's connection between strategic priorities and what really will change for better for these residents. And I think these are simple things we all understand. So this whole picture, it just shows you how the investment projects are connected with our general global goal. Now, I want to ask you, well, don't look at this slide yet. I just want to ask you, why do we need indicators at all? Why do we need to measure results? Maybe we can just build something without this? Why do we measure? To analyze? To analyze what we've achieved. Yeah, so a measure of success. So when we measure something, we're not just saying, well, this is such a great thing, here's water. Maybe that's a bad water. Maybe it impacts negatively. So when we measure something, this is a measure of your success. So in order to measure this success, we need to measure what we have now, to do some baseline, to do the lab research or lab tests of the water, input data, and to say we have emergency brigades. They repair our grids 24 days per month. Is that a bad indicator? Yeah. But what if we repair the grid, if we change the grids, and what do we have? We have one or two emergencies per month, and there will be a much better water. So this is a very important factor because the health of people depends on the quality of water. So there are studies, there's analysis, there's science about the impact of quality of water for people. So now, very important to analyze performance, and because they show you measurable results, to analyze efficacy of spending. There's like one community replaced the water pipes, and they now have the spending for 1 meter, 1 indicator. Another community, same conditions, received a much higher indicator. So the question is, why? What's the reason for that? Factors. Yeah, there are many factors. Or granite or sand, etc. So there's a thing, international benchmark. At some point, World Bank has done spending analysis to build 100 kilometers, and all over the world they analyzed how much it costs to build 100 kilometers of roads. Yeah, and there were different numbers. But when they run the analysis and they saw the conditions, it turns out that this average indicator, this is how much the country has to spend for building roads. So on Middle East, we hear a lot from Middle East now. These countries and turns out that in the Middle East, on Arabian Peninsula, the roads are much more expensive. Why? Because temperatures are high, and they have to cover it with polymer coating. Otherwise, the asphalt is melting, and it just melts. But if you drop all those individual factors and calculate it, where's the corruption in this formula? So if you analyze it, you can see the percentage of corruption, because you clearly know the cost of 100 kilometers of road has to be like this. So one road, 2 roads, underground crossing, all these things, but the indicator is the bridge between the costs and spending and investments. This is also managerial decisions. If you're building 3 projects. So we have indicators, but something about this project is not going well. So we were expecting the situation to improve, and then it's not. So why doesn't it improve? Maybe not enough time has passed. In order to see the results. It's like investment has happened, but there were no results. Maybe something was done wrong. Maybe not enough. Maybe we built wastewater treatment, but people don't know. They've never did that. So there are still many emergencies. So that's one. It's not just build something, it's a complex project. Other than building something, we have to make sure to change the culture. When they start using services or new infrastructure, they have to understand how to use it. It's like road safety. When the road is improving, then unfortunately sometimes more accidents happen. Why? Because people are driving faster. So you have to work with culture of driving. And there was this tragedy in Tottenham, and children were hit. So again, children, and you see that it's terrible, and you need to explain this to people. It doesn't work automatically. You have to work with parents and children in schools. I remember I was a student, and me and my friend, we had to cross the road. There were 2 crossing points. So on ground and underground. And we ran across the street because there was a trolley bus and we were in a hurry. And said there was a traffic officer stopped us, and for 30 minutes reading us a lecture. You have to cross the letter either on that crossing point or over. And that's so that's like cliche, but ever since I only cross on a zebra. My point is culture and behavior has to be worked with. If you properly motivate people, or sometimes intimidate, that is the motivation to change. So managerial decisions, when you have some results of a project and you see that this improvement of indicators are not in place, what do you have to do? You have to think, maybe the project is not moving well. Maybe we're moving in the wrong direction, and it doesn't bring us to a good result. So this is where your managerial decision comes into play. So initially, you think, what has changed for people or for community? And this is where it's really important to stress that an important thing is when you, for instance, you have several projects, like you're talking about water channel, like you install pipes, new waste treatment facilities, make investments, like an investment comes in, gives us money, and we changed a lot of stuff. And we're thinking, like, okay, within this strategy, we can achieve this and that as a result. It's your creativity, how you formulate this result. Because on one hand, you can, for instance, write in a strategy such results to increase the number or amount of population who will be receiving high quality water 24/7 from 45% to 80%. And energy efficiency gives us that and that. So this is the integral indicator that you can set in your strategy. Or alternatively, you can use a different indicator if the key part of your work will be healthcare. Then you can use a different one your indicator will be decreased mortality rate because of the water. So you collect information. What is the percentage of people who get sick because of the bad water? What are the characteristic diseases? And then you show that your main impact is not only to make give people water, but a good water and to improve their health. So you're looking at a higher level indicator, not just some characteristics of housing or utilities. Well, I think you know and understand these things, and now I will talk about the methodology. Basically, it's the methodology of World Bank. When there are three key indicators of results, the first level is output. So output is in English is what specifically have you done? The works done, goods procured, services provided, kilometers of roads, water, grid improved, refurbished. So it's technical output. And then comes outcome, and it's an indicator the effect of what you've done. Of course, expected that it's a positive result. So if you build a road or you repair a road, that cuts the time for logistics and decreases incidents. You talked with people, explained so that they maintain better slower speeds. So you give them heads up to cross the streets only where it's allowed. Or early warning, early detection of diseases. So if you procured some equipment for your hospital, you train the personnel, then what's your indicator? An output is something you've done, what you procured, whom you trained, and so on. Well, the outcome is where it's the result and effect. If you have early detection of diseases, then you can treat people faster, you return their quality of life. That's the outcome. So I'm going to ask you, output and outcome. Which of these indicators is great for PIP, for PIN, public investment projects? An outcome, right. Output is just technical stuff. So this difference for me is what we've built, technically, what we procured, whom we trained, how many, etc. Whereas the outcome is what you have as a result. Like less energy consumption, for example, as you talked about solar batteries. So that's the same thing. Last summer we installed solar batteries, and I was against it. I said maybe it's okay, and my husband said you never know. So when this investment, when there will be a return of investments, I don't know. We don't sell it to the grid, but we survived the winter with heat and light. That's already an outcome. So for me, it's convenient conditions. So this investment has returned. Although we had to clean those panels, and it's good that we put it on garage. That's the best place, turns out. So inverter was standing in the barn, and we had to build or buy an oven. But it all gives you a result. It gives you the feeling that you have convenience. So, and the latest indicators are impact, so long-term effects. We talk about direct and indirect effects. So, social economic effect. You repair the road that farmers bring their produce to the market. Earlier, it took longer, like with tomatoes in Kropivnitsky, and I heard that I wouldn't make it there alive.
But they bring their tomatoes, and instead of tomatoes, they got ketchup at the end. That would be added value, absolutely correctly. So while we speak about impact, we say that originally farmers, the road was much better. They could deliver their tomatoes quicker, more effectively. They can sell those as tomatoes, but not as a ketchup. And a long-term impact, that would be farmers' revenues growing. They will pay more taxes to the local budget. So you also got your adds on for repairing the road. If you invest in the healthcare, same way, you can measure, first of all, what you've done as part of your project. Then you measure the impact, earlier detection of diseases, and then you gradually can measure, as a strategy implementation, the less percentage or less death cases from strokes. If you deliver a patient to a hospital quicker and provide medical care, you increase chances for returning back to life and full-scale life. And the duration of life, once again, or availability of specialized equipment and the operator for that equipment. Can't hear without microphone. Absolutely fair. So, you absolutely fair example mentioned. You could repair the hospital, you could purchase equipment, but not having an operator, skillful user, as I said, 1 plus 1 should be more than 2. And there you can see the long-term impact. I would like to get back to you one more time. Looking at these outputs, outcomes and impacts, we agreed that output, that's PKD. Outcome, that's PEEP, and impact, what is? That's your strategy. That is your strategy. Moreover, you can consider not a single strategy, but several strategies. Because in fact, when you implement one strategy, you have to prepare the next one. And that impact, a long-term impact, could be met with even better outcomes if with the new strategy at the next stage you will continue some investments, or you would attract some private investments, encourage those investments, and you can met a long-term impact maybe in 20 years, but you need a continuity of activities. So another principle of strategic planning, when you prepare and draft new strategy, you not only analyze your current situation, but also what was done as part of the previous strategy, what have succeeded, what were the outcomes, and what should they do to multiply that positive effect that I received from the previous strategy implementation. So these are some basic principles that the strategy development is based on. And finally, I would like to show you such a picture, that's approach used by the World Bank while drafting strategies. So your strategy and those priority projects, that's what Alexander spoke about. Choice is always difficult, and believe me, even World Bank sometimes has problems with identifying priorities. How come? I was a country manager, I was the boss. All the sectors of the World Bank comes to me and say, Here in education, we have to have projects because there are problems such and such. Let's do so. Transport sector comes and says, no, no, no. No roads, nothing is going to happen. Let's do roads. Government wants, we have governmental letter. When we also had a forestry, people come from this forest branch and said, no, you know, forest is the top, it's priority. For the next 6 years, if we would not do investments here, the entire forest is going to be stolen and cut off, and we have to manage. And the same comes to the fishery, everything in that sort. And then we have to see, look, here you want contribute to education. All other donors work in healthcare or in education. Why we should channel our limited resources of the World Bank? There are others, Germans, Brits, they invest a lot in there. Let's do something that would be complementary, that would add value that others are doing. Or let's see what they are doing and what they are not doing, and then we come and contribute something missing in order to reach a better effect. For you, of course, we prepare such a picture. That's a strategic need. If you decided to yourself that you have a strategic objective and some strategic aims, that's speaking about the project, that's the preparedness of the project. If it is sits somewhere and you have no clue what's going on, but if you prepare it here and you have an understanding what you would like to change, or maybe you have a financial capacity to do so, you analyzed, you reviewed, and you decided to yourself, yes, we have resource, state may give something. Of course, that has to be the after effect of your strategic planning. First and foremost is a strategic need, a strategic necessity, and then you analyze other aspects. And at the core here, that would be your project that is at the junction of all those directions. There was a question, what to do if the government allocates subvention? Great, that's financial resource that would help us to do something. But whether this project is useful to you, is it needed to you? And this yellow circle, that's the strategic need that you have to reflect. So that visual logic allows you to do your choices. I have to confess it is not easy to do, and even the World Bank, which has enormous experience in that, every time while drafting strategies we faces very challenging choices. Not every idea becomes a priority for public investments or an investment project. It is difficult to do, but once again here we have many factors included, so logic of that sort would allow you to prioritize. And finally, I'm not going to dwell much on that. Alexander had spoken about that. While you work on a strategy, and especially at the strategy implementation, all these stakeholders, all their participants, actors with whom you interact, they have to be engaged. You know, when we were doing our strategic session in Zvyagil, one lady asked a question. You know, when we talk to people and ask about their problems, they bring so many things to us. So everything is a problem. Someone has the hole in front of their house, someone has the water with a poor quality, and so on and so forth. So what do we do with that? Of course, I don't have a magic pill to all the diseases, but when you come to seek an advice from your community, you'd better to have some sort of a vision, not like an open book, tell me about your problems. They will tell you about their problems, everything about anything. But if you come and say, look, I have 5 priorities for myself, and I'm thinking to myself how our strategy should look like, then you narrow your frame to some specific ideas. Well, that's the way I did my consultations. We do consultations in the same way, not only with government, with public, with NGOs, with media. you name what, private sector. And when you come with a certain menu, like in a restaurant, and restaurant would not be offering you anything you wish. Oysters, no oysters. But while you produce a given list of something that you would like to achieve, then this dialogue is arranged in a different way. It is seen a bit differently. Just an idea, a slight digression that I would like to share with you. And finally, there is such a thing as a chain of results. Apparently, it is built on impact, outcome, output, but it is important that we start with a strategy. We set the objective to improve access to education. The project, the school construction, that's training to teachers. Let's say we would like to be more IT aware. So we do many things as part of the project. What would be the output? You see, we have many IDPs, the schools overloaded, 2 shifts for schooling. If we upgrade the school, we will have 500 additional seats for students. That would be output. That's a tangible result that we did something. What would be the outcome? That's the reduction of the workload. Our teachers are all overloaded. There are many kids when there are 45 kids in the class, not 30. Definitely the results of the schooling would be much worse. So the impact that we expect is improve of the schooling quality. We can check the NMT, the parameter of mastering the discipline or better results in schooling. So we can see how we advance from strategy to impact. But what is interesting, for every of these 5 levels, you can identify the parameters of efficiency. Those would be different. I would like to stop here and ask, are there any questions, or is it more or less clear? More or less clear. But I was keen to ask you, let's say, improve access to education as a strategic objective. What sort of parameter you would like to suggest, what you are going to use to measure the success in here? There could be many. That's the creativity, that's the art, not a science. There is an element of art. The school bus. Great. Increase the number of pupils transported by a school bus. What sort of parameter that could be? Output. So while we purchase school buses, we would like to increase the number of school buses carrying pupils, and our output would be the number of school buses purchased and share of kids transported by school buses. What could be the outcome in that situation? While you look at the school buses, you could say the reduction of risks to kids transported by bus. If they drive on their own or on a public transport, they could digress somewhere, or they can find themselves in the middle of the road. So while you offer them a school bus, you would reduce their health risks, because while we were living in the United States, when the school bus stops, all the vehicles immediately have to stop. So the school bus has a special sign pressed to the board. When it stops, the sign goes on, and it's a stop sign. All the vehicles have to stop. No one goes nowhere, and it's such a strong violation, so the penalty is thousands of dollars. So that's the practice and the habit and the culture of people. And they all know that the school bus is the most safest transport because everyone is very careful when they see a school bus. So as an outcome, we may think about kids' safety and reducing the impact of accidents or emergencies on kids' health and the quality of education. Absolutely fair. Safe travel, stay there in time, and stay in school until the collection by the school bus. Another factor that adds to the increase of quality of their education. If we do a shelter, Oksana had mentioned in Stavensee, they have this underground school. So this is an underground school with a full-scale training and education, and it means it's not only kids sitting in the basement stuck in their phones. No, they goes underground and they continue their lessons. Same in Zaporizhia. So speaking about those investments, we have to think what we've done. We've built a shelter. Is it a proper shelter or is it just a temporary hide from ballistics or shaheeds or whatever? But speaking about outcomes, that's going to be the impact on the end results. So the life and health of kids, but from the educational process standpoint, they would have a better parameters of mastered knowledge, and in terms of impact, these kids later on can join the universities, get better education, and eventually not all the university graduates have decent salaries, but overall there is a worldwide tendency: the better education you have, the higher income you have. At this point, one more time, is it clear so far? So mutual relations of this strategic parameters and project parameters is not obvious, but you always can think and find the ways in between. So here I would like to conclude. If there are any questions about presentation, I don't want to delay you. It's 17:15. I promised that I will match in that frame. But if you have any urgent questions, I will be happy to respond. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. I wish you all the successes, and I wish you in a year, all of you, to have your strategies ready. Thank you, Larissa. I see you are quite tired. Your focus of attention is shifted now. All the presentations are going to be sent to you. I will summarize briefly. I have 3 slides, step by step, what is to be done when you return home. So let me quickly go through what should we do in our strategic planning. We have 265 methodology, what to do with the strategy. There are different elements: SWOT analysis, assessment, introduction. So you have to familiarize yourself with that methodology. Then, the first and foremost, why we're here, to make a political decision that we will do a strategy development, or we will update our strategy if it is out of date. According to this methodology, you have to set a working group, engage key stakeholders, key units. If you don't have those, to find them somewhere, hire them, and they have a project offices set, and to analyze, to review your community. Or you can make a political decision, find money elsewhere and hire some external consultants if you are not willing to do it on your own or if you don't have sufficient resource to do so. To analyze your community, to review your community, besides historical background, demography, to consider different social parameters to ensure the inclusiveness, public consultations to a focus group of business, of parents, from school kids, all other possible target audiences available in your community, and do a first set of priorities, and following the priorities, the action plan. It's all in methodology, and later on, let's say, a strategic framework is one thing and investments would be other things, and following your strategy you will have your investment directions, projects and indicators for your success measurement. The key idea here that could be done tomorrow, engaging everyone available in your community to check with your local business how they are going to be developed, because you create infrastructure around economy, and working economy is the development of demography, school education, preschool education, and new jobs. And I spoke with representatives with Dnipro City Council, a million population, and their education department is developing their own strategy. And say, if we do a real audit of a school system, we have to close 40% of schools, and this is not a politically correct decision. But strategically, that would be better than to build shelters in every school that we have. Because people are there, but pupil left. So engage each and everyone and assess really all the spheres that you have. That's your first and foremost task following the political decision. And the first 30 days after we say goodbye and we dive in this story decision to start, then you need to do your base analysis, first initial consultations, and some initial outline to be drafted to proceed further. In 30 days, your community can have a team, data, priorities, and the first outline for the action plan that could be included into the history of your strategic investment plans, your project ideas, something that you would use as a reference for further financing, and milestones for your investment projects. As I promised, I was absolutely precise and brief. Look, we're not saying goodbyes to each other. We're traveling all over Ukraine. We have social networks. We have ICANN page in Facebook. We will visit your regions. You will receive the respective letters either from Kiev School of Economy or from your oblast administrations. Please send your experts, finance experts, utility experts for trainings. Our next steps, we continue doing so. We continue trainings how to prepare investment projects qualitatively, step by step, how to do the expenses review, how to assess cheaper or more expensive funding, how to select a funding source. Order 316 been asked today, how to fill this expected cost of the project. So look for your letters from us or from your administration. You will see I can words. Come in person, send your specialists from your companies, each and every one. We would be happy to meet you. I'm sure it is not our first. It is first, but not the last meeting as part of ICANN project. I want to wish you. The news are not really promising for the upcoming evening and night, but our informal communication can continue. Alexander, Larissa, and all others are here. I will conclude, probably. Thank you, and see you.